Okay, so welcome back. This is part two in our series where we help you to understand DC control relays. And in part one, we looked at this example of a module that has four DC control relays on it. And we explained what they are, what's in these little blue boxes, how do they work, what are all these components, why are they here. It's really important that you understand what all this stuff is, because if you're going to interface it with a control device, you've got to understand what you're controlling, or else you can end up damaging things. So I encourage you to look at part one. In this video, we're going to take the next step and we're going to figure out, now that we know what all these components are on this board, we're going to figure out how we can actually connect that up to our control device. We're going to be using an Arduino. You can control it with whatever you got. And these simple 5-volt relays, we're going to figure out how to control them with the Arduino. And we're going to connect the Arduino to our computer and write a very, very simple C# application where you can, from your computer, press some buttons to open and close these relays and power on and off whatever lights or whatever you want to control with it. If you've never written software before, I strongly encourage you to look at our C# for beginners. It's a simple 3-part series where it shows you how to write some simple software applications. And really, in the science engineering world, it's really important that you learn how to write software, because at the end of the day, everything runs on software. I know people like to play with hardware and flashing lights, but hardware is dumb. It doesn't do anything without software behind it. So if you want to understand stuff, I encourage you to learn how to write some software. So we're going to show how to hook this up, how to wire it up to our Arduino, and we're going to show you how to write a simple sketch on the Arduino, and then a very simple C# application on our computer to control the Arduino and operate these relays. Now, in the previous video, we talked about these components on this board, and we came up with this diagram showing what some of those components are. And we said that basically the Arduino is going to, in its output pins, it's going to set a pin high or low, and that will ultimately energize or de-energize this relay to open or close the contacts that are feeding whatever load you've got. And we also talked about this jumper over here. You can see it says JDVCC and VCC, and it's a jumper to connect those two pins together. And that's what you see up here. You got this little jumper, one JDVCC and VCC. And we said that we don't really want to power this relaying circuit, the power circuit from the Arduino, because we could get some transients that might damage the Arduino. So we're going to take advantage of this isolation circuitry, and we're going to instead power the relay from one pin of this jumper, the JDVCC pin, and we're going to connect that to an external power supply. And we also talked about this optocoupler, but we're also going to have to come up with a way to power this optocoupler, the LED part of the optocoupler, so that we can turn it on and off. And the way this is wired in this module is this optocoupler is wired like this, where the LED half of it is wired to the VCC pin. We're going to have to not only have an external power supply to this JDVCC to power the relay, but also we have to somehow power this VCC pin, because it's going to provide power to the LED part of the optocoupler. And again, the Arduino output pin is going to go either high or low to turn this on or off, but still we need a DC supply. So we're going to have to make sure that we have some connection to this VCC pin to 5 volts, whether we're going to use the Arduino or the external power supply. So it's really important you keep in mind that this LED is wired to the VCC, so we're going to have to somehow power that pin also. So here are all the components. We've got the jumpers for ground and the control signals coming into the 4 relays, and then our jumper here. So let's take a look at how we're going to actually wire this up on the bench. So here is our Arduino, and here is our set of relays, and we're just going to use one relay right now, the relay number 1. And we're going to take our 5-volt DC power supply. It's going to be connected to ground. We're going to first remove this jumper, and we're going to connect our 5 volts from the power supply to this JDVCC, which is this. And we're going to connect the VCC, which is here on this long jumper, or here. These two are connected together. But we got to make sure we also supply 5 volts to either one of these VCCs, because it has to be like this so you can power the LED. So we got to make sure we got 5 volts coming into VCC and JDVCC. And we also need to have the control signal from the Arduino. Now I'm going to choose a digital output pin, and we're going to choose pin number 8. And we'll talk in another video about the difference between the analog and digital and PWM pins. But we're for now going to use pin number 8, and that's going to go to IN1, which is where the control signal goes for relay number 1. And that's this right here. And then we also have to take the ground from the Arduino and connect it to the ground of this set of pins. So now let's go take a look on the bench and see this all wired up and ready to go. So here we are on the bench, and you can see I've got my Arduino Uno connected up via USB to the computer. And over here I've got a buck converter. We've done a video on this before. Very nice regulated 5 volt DC output, and it connects to a variable wall adapter. So here we've got 5 volts coming into this breadboard, and here I've got 5 volts and then ground. And all I'm doing is I am taking the ground from the Arduino and connecting it to the ground of the power supply, and then the digital output pin number 8 going to the in1 of the relay, and then the ground of the relay going to the ground of the power supply. And the last two are just the 5 volts from the power supply going to what we talked about before. And you can see I've removed this jumper that's right here. So now I have the JVDC coming from the 5 volts, and I've also got the VCC going to the 5 volts as we showed before. So everything's all set to go. So let's set this up and then see how it works. So now here we are in the Arduino IDE, and let's write a very simple sketch to send commands to turn on and off the relays. So first thing I'm going to do is fix these curly brackets. I'm not sure who came up with the idea to make these curly brackets like that. But anyway, first thing we want to do in the void setup with the serial port, we'll write serial.begin and 9600 for 9600 baud. And then we're going to use pin 8. So pin mode 8, comma, output. So now we're all set with the COM port, the serial port. So now all we have to do is, in the loop, sit there and wait for a command coming over the USB. So what I'll do is I'll write a if serial.available. So it's basically sitting there waiting for a command to come in. And then we'll say receive string equals serial.read string until. So basically we're just going to wait for a new line character from the string coming from the serial port from your computer over the USB. Now we just need to figure out what the receive string says. So what we can do is we can say, okay, let's say that if we get a C, it will close the relay. And if we get an O, it will open the relay. We can have an if receive string dot starts with, let's say C for close. That means we need to set the output pin 8 as low. Digital write 8, comma, low. All right, so if we're getting a close command, we need to set 8 low. Else if receive string starts with O, digital write 8, comma, high. All right, so that should be about it. We're just waiting, and we're saying if it starts with a C or an O, we'll open or close the relay. So now once we fix a couple errors, we need to specify string receive string up here and add a couple parentheses on the if and else if. We'll run it and we'll see it's compiling. So now we need to go into our Visual Studio and write a very simple C# application that will send a C or an O to operate this relay. So let's jump over to Visual Studio and set that up. So now I've started a blank C# Windows Forms application in Visual Studio. And as you can see here, we've got our standard Form 1. And if I hit F7, I see the code behind it, and there's basically nothing there. So if we're going to be talking over the COM port, we know we're going to have to go into this toolbox on the left and go down to serial port. And I'm going to drag and drop a serial port. And over on the right, I'm going to change the name from serial port 1 to Arduino port. And it's set to 9600 baud. So we should be all set to go with that. I'm also going to need some buttons. Now the buttons I need are to open and close the relay. Drag and drop one button, and I'm going to rename it to BTN Open Relay. And I'm going to change the text to Open Relay. And I'm going to change the font to, say, a 12. And then I'm going to copy and paste that. And now I'm going to change that to BTN Close Relay, and go down here and change it to close. So now we've got our buttons. We're also going to need to open and close the COM port. So I'm going to paste that again and say Open COM, and I'm going to rename it BTN COM Open. And I'm going to copy and paste that. I'm going to say the text is close COM, and I'm going to rename it to BTN COM Close. So now we can do the event handlers for each of these just by double click on that one, double click on that, double click on that, and then double click on that. So now we've got our event handlers. So the first thing we're going to do is open the COM port. So we're going to do Arduino port.open and then COM port close, Arduino port.close. And in my case, I'm going to set it to COM6, Arduino port name equals COM6. So now we've got COM6, and the first thing we're going to do is button open relay, click event handler. So we know if we're going to open the relay, we have to set the value as low. So we're going to say Arduino port.WriteLine. We're going to give it an O for open. And then we can take this and copy and paste. And instead of an O, we're going to do a C for close. Now I'm also going to add a text box to get some feedback on whether the COM port is open or closed. So we'll go over here and go to Label, and we'll call it LBL COM, and we'll change the font to size 12. And here we can go to the event handler. If we're going to say COM port open, and we do an if Arduino port dot is open, lblcom.text equals COM6 is open. And we can do the same thing for closed COM port. Control C, Control V equals false. COM6 is closed. So now we should be ready to run this. And we can say open COM port, COM6 is open. And I'm hearing the relay opening and closing as I click these. So let's go to the bench and see if everything's working okay. So now here is our application running, and you can see from the bench camera, we've got our relay hooked up to the Arduino, and it is powering a ring light, and that's a USB powered ring light. You can see down on the bottom right, there's a USB connector, and it's just feeding into the relay contacts, and the light is on, and I can go to open relay, which means open relay contacts, and it will turn it off. And if it close relay, it closes the contacts, turns it on, and then open. So you can see this works okay, and of course you can modify this to add some more functionality. In future videos, we're going to look at our protective relaying simulator, and we're going to hook up this relay, and we're actually going to do simulating a fault current where this relay will open a circuit to protect against a fault current. So if you like any of these videos, please hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell notifications, but most of all, please let others know that we're here so we get some views. Really appreciate it. Otherwise, take care. Have a really good day. Thanks.